All right, let's see. All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Eugenia Kim, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my co-authors, Kim Vinks and John McCormick. And I do believe John is in the audience today. So if anybody has any questions, he's also on hand to answer them, I guess. And for those of you who are wondering what in the world is an Oncheon, it's just a Korean word for hot springs. And basically what happened is this project started with a movement experiment while in a hot spring. And for Koreans, it's also associated with a certain cleansing ritual or the habits that you engage in when you're visiting one. And therefore it has sort of a therapeutic or healing effect. And the reason why this therapeutic or healing effect is very important is because in somatic practices, the therapeutic or healing effect through touch, through movement, through breath, through energy transfer, all those things are very important. And basically the idea was, how would you capture all of those qualities and put it into a meditative VR project? And for tonight, tonight where I am in Hong Kong, I'll just be focusing on the motion capture aspect, which I believe is already going to be quite technical enough. But before I go into that, I should just probably introduce all the people who are involved in this, because there are 3 names on the paper, but there's actually a very long list of people who either contributed directly to this project or indirectly to this project. I kind of feel like Kim and John do not really need introductions because everyone I know knows them. But for those who don't know Kim and John, they are amazing experts, really. I don't know any other better word in motion capture and immersive environments and all sorts of other fabulous technology. But the best part is they are also dance experts. And for this project, that was the most sort of essential factor, because basically what I was seeking help for was, how in the world do you really customize choreography and performance for motion capture, and not in the sense of like acting or anything like that. Furthermore, there's a more specific twist of how do you integrate somatic practice into that process. And again, Kim and John are very experienced in this area, so it was a real pleasure to be able to work with and learn from them. So I think to understand this project a little bit better, one must realize that this is the result of basically a 2 to 3 year journey. It started with a meeting in summer 2017, around the time I actually attended EVA London for the first time. And that's where I first met Kim. And then I started on my motion capture journey, blindly stumbling along. And then by chance, I met John at the end of 2018 at SIGGRAPH Asia. And from there, I had an opportunity to finally visit their facility and then eventually record there. And then many other things have happened in the space since, and here we are today. So this is the just background information for anybody who is not familiar with dance or somatic practices or the existing trends in motion capture and somatic practices research. I think the main things I just wanted to emphasize is that it's very difficult to really record and then translate certain inherent human qualities into the digital and virtual realms. I don't know that there's really any textbook out there that really properly explains how do you record energy or breathing in a way that really feels adequate, or to even transfer that sensation of watching someone really breathe as they move. Also, there's some other things that are not really addressed still. So for example, the fact that motion capture and animation gives you some freedom as a dancer. And by that, I mean, you do not have to conform to certain body types. You don't have to necessarily feel restricted to the, how do I put it, the laws of physics, basically. Perhaps during performance you will, but then later on in post, you have a chance to sort of adjust all of that. Oh dear. So basically, this is just sort of the background information that one must take into consideration while listening to the rest of this talk. Now, for those of you who do not know what the Embodied Movement Design Studio is, it's a beautiful space down in Melbourne and it's part of the Swinburne University of Technology in the Center for Transformative Media Technologies. Really, though, for someone like me, as a performer, the most beautiful aspect is that it has a sprung dance floor and it's a really large, airy space. This might not seem very important, but things like carpet, things like a low ceiling, all of those things can really inhibit your movement. And also just the space is kind of inspiring unto itself. So really it's a very liberating space to be in, and it really sort of opens your mind for experimentation. It's also extremely high-end technology, so it's just really a really wonderful space. So basically what happened was I just got very lucky while visiting Melbourne in April 2019. I was visiting the Sensa Lab at Monash University, and John very kindly let me come visit EMD. And it just so happened that they were doing some benchmark testing. And at first, I really had no idea what to do other than just try to follow their directions or just randomly come up with some dance movement. And it wasn't the first time that I had been using an OptiTrack system. But what was different was that in the past, whenever I had been using an OptiTrack system, I had always had to be very careful about not knocking off a marker or avoiding occlusion or just moving in a certain way so as to not create an error in the system. And in this case, it basically felt like I had full freedom to try to break not only that system, but another system that I was wearing at the same time, which was the perception neuron. And basically, as I mentioned earlier, the space is very inspiring. And when they handed me a little ball, I basically thought, well, why not try to be a cat playing with the ball? And because of that, I tried out all sorts of movement that I never would have normally tried. And that became the seed for a new choreographic project. So this is just the respective reflections of myself and John. And I think you can see, just looking at them side by side, the differences in what each of us were observing in terms of the qualities and issues at hand. And I think for myself, the main takeaway was just understanding better how my body operates and is represented in this as digital data, basically. And for John, because it was a benchmarking test, obviously the concern is more about how are the two systems performing. But it was really nice to have someone who understood sort of the excitement about trying out this very challenging movement that normally should not have worked, and also allowing that freedom and giving feedback. So some months passed and I had a chance to come back to Melbourne. And before I did, I asked, is there any possible way I could record movement for a new project? And they very kindly said yes. We scheduled some time, and this time I got to work with Kim. John was there for the second session, but the person directing me was basically Kim. And I have a link there to a video of that shows side by side one of the takes while I'm performing it, and then the motion trails visualization. So I won't play it here, but if anybody would like to get a glimpse into what was taking place, that video is online. Something I should mention that was a little interesting was I believe we only had 56 markers for most of the takes. But at the end, we decided to just get a little bit silly and try 80 markers because of this sort of a way to test, is it really true? That the more markers you have, the more higher quality data that you get. Unfortunately, what we found was that it wasn't necessarily that much of a significant difference, but it was still fun to be able to have that back and forth and room for trying out new things. So from this session, these two sessions, I again learned a lot of new things. And I think one thing I should mention is that Kim has extensive experience working with somatic practitioner choreographers who are far more experienced and expert than I am in that area. And she also has the years and years of experience from working with different motion capture projects. So basically what I was able to do was go in there, perform the choreography I had come up with thus far. And then she would be able to not only advise me on the technical aspects in terms of what I was doing in relationship to the system, but then additionally also from an artistic perspective, offer suggestions. And so that worked a lot better than before, where I always felt like a struggle between sort of the creative artistic side of my movement and then trying to accommodate a technology system. Of course, it helps that the system is very responsive, and therefore I didn't have to really adapt as much as normal. But there were some movements I have in there, and it's in the video, where we all sort of held our breath because we weren't sure if the system was going to pick it up. So like a rolling around on the floor kind of movement and things like that. And another thing that was very interesting was being able to witness pre-acceleration for the first time. This is a concept that Kim is familiar with, or very familiar with, because she has written about it. But it's hard to explain it in text. So to be able to see it and experience it, and then be able to talk about it with somebody who is very familiar with it, that definitely changes how one starts to view movement potential. Another interesting thing was just simply that I was actually in a lot of pain during those recording sessions. So integrating somatic movement practice elements into the choreography actually ended up really helping the process along. I think without that, it would have been extremely difficult to do any of the recordings. So what happened to this data? So you see in one corner, the side-by-side comparison. And then what you see to the far side in the red and the purples is what happened when we just took that data as it was and mapped it in Unity to particle trails. And it's kind of interesting because the red gives you a sense of where the human body is. And then the other side, it's far less obvious. And then finally, the purple squiggle on the bottom is still the same data. But at that point, without doing much processing, it's already taken on a completely new shape entirely. And so I think these images illustrate the overall goal of this project, which is just going away from accentuating the body towards feeling the body and then completely obliterating the human shape, so that you can really focus on the pure essence of movement and motion. And I think a lot of what has helped is using that sort of internal motivation as the starting point for movement, rather than worrying about external appearances and shapes and poses. Another thing that really helps is thinking about about your intention and sort of locating it to associating it with a different point on your body. It sounds a little strange, but it actually really does change how you move. Since that time, this project has actually led to a proof of concept. So the image you see up on the top is from that proof of concept. And I have just been receiving feedback from multiple people, including Ron, who will be presenting next. And it also helped inform a remote collaboration with Yuru Ma and Zelia Tan through a city contemporary dance company residency here in Hong Kong. And I have to say, it's one thing to be performing and understanding what is going on with mocap, but then it's a completely different thing to try to then have to explain and share that knowledge with other people so they can do the same thing after you. So all in all, it's been quite eye-opening. And the project is basically being redesigned for various factors. I won't name the obvious one, but hopefully we will see it finish in the next year or so. So in case anybody wishes to learn more, these articles and books and everything are very useful. And if you have any questions, the email address is on the bottom. So that's all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We sort of missed the rounds of applause, but thank you very much indeed. I wasn't going to put poor Eugenia off at the beginning by saying that last year she won our best presentation at EVA London. But I can say now, thank you very much for a lovely, inspiring presentation to begin our second day of EVA. Lovely graphics and lovely storytelling. So thank you very much indeed. Does anyone have any questions? Let me just have a quick look down and see if there are anything. Can't see any as yet. Let me just have a quick look. Oh yes, here we have from Daniela. Thanks for your talk. Is there any particular movement technique that inspires the choreography?
Right. So I guess you could say it fits under the umbrella of contemporary dance. My own personal training is a combination of ballet, jazz, and modern. For this piece, though, the traditional Korean dance form known as salpuri, or sort of the shaman's dance, about ritual purification, that was one of the main inspirations. And you can actually see some of those movements in there. Some influence from my Tai Chi training also came in, as well as in the beginning, the concept of contact improvisation with oneself and Steve Paxton's small dance. Those would be sort of the significant influences for this.
Great. Okay, we have another question, this time from Danielle Jacques. What advice would you give to an artist wanting to start out in performance and motion tracking?
Well, I almost want to defer to John on that one. I'll just simply say that for myself, it was a little bit of perseverance, but I think the easiest thing is that there are now interesting services where you can send in your video footage and then they'll translate it into motion capture data. And I think that might be actually one of the cheapest ways now to get started. But yeah, I'll give a shout out to Rococo. Their suits are actually really easy to acquire and set up and try on. So there's a lot of entry points now, a lot more than even last year.
That's really great. Thank you. Okay, I think that is all our questions and answers. Thank you very much indeed for a wonderful presentation.